She thought it would be a peaceful solo hike, just the wind in the pines, the crunch of boots on fallen leaves. But a single cry, sharp, wild, unmistakably not human, changed everything. When 29-year-old Casey Bennett spotted a trembling, wide-eyed bobcat kitten huddled beneath a rock ledge, she had no idea what lay ahead. Rescue? Survival? A connection beyond anything she'd known. This wasn't just about helping a wild animal. It was about healing wounds neither of them had shared, yet both carried. And what happened deep in the Colorado wilderness would leave even the most skeptical viewers stunned. Into the wild. Some people run to the mountains to escape the noise. She went to silence the screams within. The Colorado sky stretched endlessly above her, a crisp sapphire canopy trimmed in pale orange by the early morning sun. Below it, Casey Bennett adjusted the straps of her hiking pack, her breath puffing into the thin mountain air in soft clouds. She stood at the edge of a remote trailhead in the San Juan Mountains, her boots planted on frozen soil and frost glittering on the dry sagebrush around her. It was 7:10 a.m., and the world was still. Casey was 29, though her weary eyes might have convinced you she carried a decade more behind them. Her auburn hair was tied back in a messy braid, a few fiery strands curling around her cheekbones. She wore no makeup, only windburn and the shadow of sleepless nights. A faded green fleece hugged her frame, the sleeves pushed up just past a thin white scar on her right wrist, one that never faded, even as the rest of her healed slowly, invisibly. This was her third solo hike in as many weeks. It had become her ritual. Hike until the pain dulled, until her past felt far enough behind that she could pretend it wasn't breathing down her neck. 6 months ago, Casey had been an ER nurse in downtown Denver, until one night changed everything. There had been a code blue, a young boy, a decision she questioned every single day since. No amount of textbooks or protocols could explain why that one still haunted her dreams. She walked away from medicine, left her apartment, her colleagues, her boyfriend. The mountains didn't ask questions. They just let her walk. The trail beneath her feet was part shale, part packed dirt, winding into the dense pine forests of the South San Juans. It wasn't listed on any tourist brochure. Casey had found it on an old ranger's blog. Too steep, too remote, too wild, it had warned. Exactly what she wanted. She tightened the waist strap of her pack and took her first step forward. The world became simple again. Foot, breath, wind, heartbeat. Birdsong filtered through the pines, and snowmelt gurgled from some hidden stream nearby. She moved like someone who knew her limits, and needed to test them anyway. After a few hours of steady climbing, she paused at a high ridge overlook. The view was staggering. An ocean of trees stretching for miles, white-capped peaks breaking through like frozen islands. She dropped her pack, took a long sip from her bottle, and leaned against a sun-warmed boulder. She almost allowed herself to feel something close to peace. Almost. But even here, in the stillness, the guilt crept back in. She saw the boy's mother in her mind, saw her own trembling hands frozen above the monitor. Casey's jaw tightened. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a dog tag chain, not military, but her old ID badge from the hospital. She stared at it. Then, as she had many times before, she tucked it back away. A sudden wind stirred the trees. She glanced up, blinking. A strange silence had fallen. No bird song, no wind through needles. Just quiet. Her instincts flared, a remnant of her trauma training. Then it came. A sound, not loud, not even human. But it sliced through the quiet like glass through skin. A cry. Thin, sharp, wounded. Not a bird, not a fox. It was a cry that didn't belong in this silence. She stood slowly, scanning the trees, her body tensing. Something was out there. Something small. something in pain. The mountains were no longer just quiet. They were listening. And so was she. Without knowing why, Casey shouldered her pack, turned toward the trees, and stepped off the trail. The bond begins with a blanket. The wild doesn't always bite. Sometimes it reaches back with trembling claws. By the time Casey reached the first ridge past the clearing, her legs were aching, and the temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees. The sun was sinking fast behind the jagged ridgeline, casting long shadows across the rocky slope. Every gust of wind carried the scent of snow, even though it was still early October. She knew what that meant up here at 9,000 feet. Once darkness fell, the cold would become dangerous. Inside her fleece, the Bobcat Kitten stirred. A weak mule escaped its throat. Casey pulled it slightly tighter to her chest, her hands cupped around its small body. It was still breathing, but faintly, like a dying ember beneath ash. "We're almost there," she murmured, not knowing if she meant it for the kitten or herself. Her planned campsite wasn't far now. She had marked a dilapidated firewatch cabin on her topo map, an old Forest Service shelter, abandoned but still standing according to her research. If it hadn't collapsed over the summer, it would be their only shot at surviving the night. 20 minutes later, after bushwhacking through tangled branches and nearly slipping on frost-slick rock, she saw it. The cabin. Leaning slightly, one shutter hanging askew, but still upright. Built of thick logs and perched on a bluff, it overlooked a ravine lined with fir trees. A rusted wood stove pipe poked out from the roof, and its single window was cracked but intact. It was, in that moment, the most beautiful sight she'd ever seen. She climbed the steps 2 at a time and pushed open the creaky door. The air inside was stale but dry. A few mouse droppings in the corner, a dusty cot, a cracked mirror, and thank God an old wood stove bolted to the far wall. She laid her pack down and, for the first time in hours, exhaled. The kitten stirred again. Casey knelt, gently, pulling it out from her fleece and laying it onto her puffy jacket. It mewed weakly, blinking up at her with bleary amber eyes. Its breathing was shallow, and its back leg remained stiff at an unnatural angle. Casey examined the limb under the warm glow of her headlamp. Swollen, slightly warm. Maybe a fracture? Possibly infected. Definitely painful. She'd seen enough broken limbs to know the signs. "I know, baby," she whispered, her fingers barely brushing the tiny paw. "You're tough, but this is gonna hurt." From her first aid kit, she pulled out iodine, sterile gauze, and the smallest splint she could make with a plastic tent peg, and medical tape. The bobcat hissed as the antiseptic hit raw skin, but didn't bite, didn't claw, just whimpered, pitiful and small. Once the splint was secure, she wrapped the kitten in her backup wool shirt and gently laid it inside her sleeping bag near the wood stove. She fed it drops of water with her fingers, using a boiled spoon from her cook set. After half an hour, it had taken maybe a tablespoon. But that was more than nothing. "You're a fighter," she told it. "I think you've done this before. You just need a break." And in that cold, creaking cabin, with the sky outside turning black and wild, a tiny, wild thing let out a soft purr. So faint, Casey thought she imagined it. But then, it came again. A thread of sound in the silence. Not quite a cat's purr. Rougher, wilder. It vibrated against her fingers. Casey smiled through tired eyes, tears she didn't expect burning at the corners. She hadn't touched another living thing in weeks. Now, this one had chosen her. Or maybe it was the other way around. Outside, the wind picked up and the first flakes of snow drifted past the broken window pane. Inside, a fire sparked to life, and with it the fragile beginning of something neither of them could have survived without. A cabin, a storm, and a decision. Sometimes, shelter isn't 4 walls and a roof. It's trust, built one heartbeat at a time. The storm rolled in faster than Casey expected. By the time she had the fire crackling inside the stove, the wind was howling through the trees like wolves in the dark. Fat snowflakes began to stick against the window's broken edge, swirling in the narrow gaps and melting on the floorboards. She stuffed a spare sock into the drafty crack and pulled her jacket tighter. The Bobcat Kitten, Echo, she'd begun to call him, was curled into the corner of her sleeping bag, half asleep, occasionally shifting with tiny spasms of pain. His breathing had deepened slightly, more rhythmic now, and his small ears twitched whenever a log popped in the stove. Outside, the San Juans had turned hostile. She moved her pad and sleeping bag closer to the stove, careful not to jostle Echo too much. Then she sat cross-legged, staring at the tiny wild creature she'd brought inside. "I wasn't planning on company," she whispered, with a crooked smile. Her voice echoed slightly against the cabin walls. She pulled her notebook from her pack, a weathered leather journal she hadn't written in since before her last shift at the hospital. She opened it slowly, ran her fingers across the blank page. And then she began to write. Not about work, not about death. She wrote about Echo, about his trembling paws, his injured leg, his trust given so freely. She wrote about the first time she realized how quiet she'd become since quitting, how afraid she was of letting people close, and how strange it was, sitting in a half-rotten cabin, whispering to a predator like it was the only soul that could hear her. Somewhere around midnight, the fire burned low. Casey set another log in the stove and curled beside Echo, the bag cocooned around them both. Outside, the wind screamed through the pass. Inside, the heat flickered, and something in her chest began to thaw. But even warmth brings hard questions. When morning came, the storm had deepened. The windows were crusted with snow, and the trail back was now buried. Casey made coffee from melted snow and tried to think clearly. Her phone still had no signal. That meant no GPS, no ranger alert, no help. She checked Echo's leg. It wasn't worse, but it wasn't better either. He needed real care. Antibiotics, x-rays, and soon. "I can't keep you here," she said softly, watching his ears flick toward her voice. "You won't survive another storm. Not like this." The idea of leaving him behind, of venturing out alone for help, made her stomach twist. What if something happened to him while she was gone? What if another predator found him? What if... He didn't understand she was coming back. She glanced at her pack. She had a small foam mat, 2 pairs of thick socks, her thermal sleeping bag, and a long flannel shirt. It would take clever wrapping, but she could build a safe sling, secure, insulated. She would carry him herself. 3 miles northeast, the Forest Service road sometimes had vehicle patrols this time of year. She could make it by dusk, if the snow wasn't too deep. It was a risk, but staying was a bigger one. She looked at Echo. His eyes opened, just a crack, and met hers. No fear, just waiting. "I guess we're doing this together, huh?" she murmured. And as she bundled the wild kitten into her chest wrap once more, Echo let out a barely audible purr. Not approval, not understanding, but something close enough. As she stepped out into the storm, the snow bit at her face and the world turned white. But this time, she wasn't walking to escape. She was walking to save something that had saved her first. Echo's awakening, Casey's return. Sometimes it takes saving something wild to remember what's still alive in you. The wind fought her with every step. Snow crunched beneath Casey's boots, packed deep and uneven, masking roots and slick rocks beneath. Each breath came in white puffs, visible for only a second before disappearing into the swirling cold. She leaned forward against the weight of the wind, arms cradled tightly around her chest, where Echo lay bundled inside the sling she'd rigged from her flannel shirt and fleece. His body pressed against hers. Faint warmth, still there, still alive. The makeshift sling was secure, padded with spare socks and her emergency blanket. It swayed slightly with her movement, but protected him from the sharp edge of the storm. Echo didn't make a sound, but now and then, Casey could feel a flutter, his small chest rising against hers. It was enough to keep her moving. 3 miles in a blizzard might as well have been 30. The trail, buried beneath fresh powder, disappeared within minutes. Only the vaguest outlines of trees and familiar markers helped orient her. But she had to believe the Ranger Road still existed, just beyond the next ridge. She had to believe someone would be there. Because turning back meant staying trapped. "Hang in there," she muttered, voice half lost in the wind. It was unclear if she meant Echo or herself. As the slope climbed higher, her thighs burned. She paused at a tree line, resting one glove against the bark, the other cradling the bundle beneath her jacket. Her thoughts drifted, not to exhaustion or pain, but to something warmer. 2 nights ago, she had curled alone beneath a different sky, in a world that felt too large, too empty to hold her pain. And now here she was, not running anymore, but climbing, carrying. For the first time in months, she had direction. Snow lashed her face, stinging like pinpricks, but she pressed on. Then, just past the break in the ridge, she saw it. A narrow tire track, faint, almost erased by snow, but it cut through the forest like a lifeline. The service road. Her heart kicked. She half laughed, half sobbed, and picked up her pace, boots sliding slightly as she stumbled down toward the path. She hadn't even reached the bottom when she heard it. An engine. Distant, muffled, but growing louder. She turned, waving both arms. "Hey!" she screamed over and over, her voice cracking. A green U.S. Forest Service truck appeared through the trees, chains on its tires rattling, headlights blurry with snow. The ranger behind the wheel squinted through the windshield, then braked hard as he saw her. The door swung open. "You all right?" Casey could barely nod. She moved toward the truck, fumbling with the sling under her coat. "I need help," she said hoarsely. "It's a Bobcat Kitten. Injured. Found him yesterday." The ranger's eyebrows shot up, but he stepped down from the cab immediately. "Let's get you both out of this cold first," he said. "We'll talk after." Inside the cab, heat blasted her face like a wave. She slid into the passenger seat, careful not to jostle Echo. The ranger adjusted the vents. "Name's Carter. You're a long way off trail, you alone." Casey nodded slowly. "I was camping. Took a wrong turn. Found him. Couldn't leave him." She pulled back her fleece. Just enough to let Ranger Carter see the kitten. Echo blinked slowly, his breath visible in the cab's warm air. "Well, I'll be damned," Carter murmured. "That's a wild one, all right." "He needs a vet," Casey said. "Soon." "And he's gonna get one," Carter assured her, shifting into gear. "You both are." As the truck rumbled back down the snowy road, Casey looked down at the fragile life still nestled against her. Echo wasn't purring anymore. He was sleeping, safe, and for the first time in a long time, so was she. But safety, like wildness, doesn't always last. And as they neared town, Casey would face a new question. What do you do with something wild when you've started to love it? Back to the world, or not? Bringing something wild into the world of men always comes with a cost. Sometimes it's your heart. The truck rolled into Silver Creek, a sleepy mountain town barely marked on maps, where weathered storefronts huddled together and a single gas station doubled as the local diner. Snow continued to fall gently as Ranger Carter turned off the main road and into a small wildlife rehab center just outside town. It was a modest building, timber-framed, surrounded by chain-link fencing and a hand-painted sign that read, San Juan Wildlife Recovery Center. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the quiet buzz of heaters and the scent of pine disinfectant. A young woman in scrubs met them at the entrance, her eyes widening when she saw the sling tucked inside Casey's jacket. "You weren't kidding," she said, kneeling. "Is that—" "A bobcat kitten," Casey confirmed, her voice softer now. "Found him yesterday. Broken leg. Malnourished." The vet, Dr. Naomi Rivers, handled the situation with calm precision. She lifted Echo gently from the wrap, her hands practiced but careful. As she carried him into the exam room, Casey found herself following without invitation. She couldn't let go, not yet. The room was sterile but warm. An exam table sat in the center, and various rescue crates lined the back wall, some empty, some quietly occupied. Dr. Rivers worked quickly, scanning Echo's vitals, listening to his shallow breathing, and finally, setting up a portable X-ray. "Fracture in the tibia," she said after a moment. "Some soft tissue swelling. He's lucky you found him when you did. Another day or two out there—" She didn't finish the sentence. Casey stared at the kitten as he lay under the heat lamp, his fur still tangled, one paw bandaged now with sterile gauze. Even with all the equipment, all the expertise, he looked smaller now, more fragile. "Will he be okay?" Casey asked. Dr. Rivers nodded slowly. "He has a good chance, especially now that he's warm, hydrated, and splinted. But he won't be released anytime soon. Could be weeks, even months. And then, if he can hunt, climb, stalk, he'll go back to the wild," she said simply. "If not, we'll have to find a sanctuary." The words hit Casey like cold air. Back to the wild. "You're gonna leave me, aren't you?" His ears perked slightly. She reached in through the soft gloved hatch and ran her fingers along the top of his head. He leaned into it just a second, then pulled back, standing awkwardly on three legs. But standing, and in that small, unspoken moment, Casey knew. She had done her part. It was time to do something harder. Let him go. Some goodbyes are made not with words, but with trust. And when you release something wild, sometimes it leaves behind something even more powerful. Hope, what the wild gave back. She saved the wild in him. He reminded her she still had her own. 1 year later, the San Juan Mountains looked different in spring, lush and alive, not buried under sheets of snow. Aspen trees shivered in a breeze that carried the scent of thawed earth and pine sap. Bright wildflowers dotted the trail that wound through the reserve's outer boundary, where a small team of rangers and wildlife rehab workers stood beside a steel transport crate under the open sky. Casey stood among them, her hands stuffed in the pockets of her field jacket, eyes fixed on the crate door. Her hair was longer now, sun-touched, pulled into a messy braid. Her posture, once stiff and guarded, now carried an ease she hadn't known in years. She had stayed in Silver Creek, first as a volunteer, then full-time wildlife assistant, helping to rehabilitate everything from raccoons to red-tailed hawks. The work didn't erase the past, but it gave her something medicine had stopped giving: meaning without perfection. Today wasn't just another release. It was Echo's. The young bobcat, once no bigger than her forearm, was now nearly fully grown. 30 pounds of muscle and instinct and grace. He had healed. More than that, he had thrived. The limp was gone. His hunting reflexes, honed over months of monitored exposure, were sharp and decisive. He was a predator again, untamed, unbroken. A soft mechanical click echoed across the clearing. The cage latch. Everyone stepped back. The door swung open with a low creak, revealing Echo poised at the threshold, eyes wide, fur bristling against the light breeze. He didn't bolt. Instead, he stood there, ears turning, nose testing the air, like he was tasting the idea of freedom first. Then his gaze shifted to her. Just for a second. Casey didn't move. She didn't wave, didn't whisper his name. She only looked back, steady, calm, open, as if to say, "It's okay. You can go now." And Echo did. A single, fluid movement. He sprang from the crate and disappeared into the tall grass beyond the ridge. No hesitation. No backward glance. Gone. The group let out a quiet breath, a reverent silence falling like a prayer. Casey swallowed hard and smiled, though her chest ached with a sudden, sharp emptiness. "He's where he's supposed to be," Dr. Rivers said beside her. Her voice was soft but certain. Casey nodded. "I know." But she stayed there, even after the others turned to walk back to the truck. She looked out over the ridgeline where he'd vanished, watched the trees sway, the grass bend, the world return to normal. Or maybe it never had to begin with. After several minutes, she pulled something from her jacket pocket. A small wooden token, carved by hand from pine, smoothed and worn from her thumb, brushing it every day for a year. It bore the outline of a paw print, and beneath it her initials. She'd meant to give it to Echo once, but now she realized this wasn't for him. It was for the place he took her to. She crouched beside the base of a pine tree, dug a small hollow in the soil, and tucked the token beneath the roots. A marker, a memory, a thank you. As she stood again, she didn't cry. She didn't ache. She just breathed. And it felt like something opened in her chest for the first time since that terrible night in Denver. Not pain, space, for possibility. She turned from the ridge and began the hike back down the trail. Each step was lighter than the last. Because somewhere out there, wild and free, was a creature that once needed her to survive. And because of him, she had remembered how to live. But stories like theirs never really end. They echo, through forests, through memory, through lives, quietly changed forever. When two broken souls meet. Healing doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it walks beside you, quiet as a paw print. Casey returned to the trail that started it, all exactly 1 year to the day. The weather was nearly identical. Cool morning breeze, sunlight slicing through pine branches, a gentle hush over the forest. But everything had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had climbed this ridge with pain stitched into her chest and silence stuffed between her ribs. She didn't carry guilt like armor anymore. She carried memory. And something else. Something lighter. The hike was quiet. No need to rush. No need to escape. When she reached the rocky outcrop, where she had first heard the cry, she stopped. The ledge still leaned into the shadow of a fallen tree, roots reaching like fingers toward a memory that had changed her life. She stood there for a while, letting the air fill her lungs. Then, from the small pocket of her jacket, she pulled out a carved wooden charm. It was the twin of the one she buried beneath the tree near Echo's release site. But this one had a single word etched across the back: return. She knelt by the tree roots, dug a shallow groove in the soft soil, and placed the token there. No ceremony, no words, just her hand lingering for a breath longer than necessary. As she stood and turned, a sharp noise cracked through the trees behind her. A rustle, a snap. Her breath caught, but not in fear. She froze, listening. Another sound. Quick pause darting through undergrowth. A flicker of movement just beyond the tree line. Something low, fast, feline. Then stillness again. She didn't move. Didn't call out, didn't chase, because maybe some stories don't need sequels. Maybe that flicker of fur in the shadows wasn't meant to be captured or confirmed. Maybe it was just the forest whispering back. A final echo. A reminder that what she gave, and what she got, still lived out there. And in here. She smiled, turning slowly toward the path. The mountain stretched before her, like an old friend. She walked with her head up, boots steady on the soil. The past no longer a weight on her back, but part of her spine. And in the quiet between footsteps, she imagined soft paws padding beside her. Not because she needed to believe he still watched her, but because she knew he did. He always would. The end.